Hey, Ms. Hurley.
That's all I have.
Good morning, Mr. Mitchell.
Good morning. This is Legislative Bill 2023, an act to authorize and empower the county of Wicomico to borrow on the full faith and credit of the Wicomico County aggregate principal amount not to exceed $12,052,500 and to evidence such borrowing by issue of sale from time to time one or more series of general obligation bonds of the county, the proceeds thereof to be used by Wicomico County to finance, refinance, or reimburse costs of certain projects for the Board of Education and the airport, including cost of planning, design, acquisition, construction, improvement, installation, renovation, rehabilitation, repairing, furnishing, and equipping of land, facilities, buildings, and structures, together with other costs and financing costs related thereto, as further described in the actual bill.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Entertain a motion from council to introduce legislative bill number 2023-07. Second.
Second.
Discussion. I know, Ms. Olin, you are chomping at the bit.
I'd be fine with no discussion, but
How are you?
good. Pamela Lynn, Finance Director. Any questions? I mean, basically, it matches the adopted budget. It funds projects for the Board of Education, which would be a tax-exempt issuance, and it funds two projects at the airport, which are both taxable entities, it'll be a taxable issuance due to the fact that the airport, their revenue comes from taxable entities.
Yes, Josh.
Remind me again, the bond contingency, $250,000.
That is to pay our fees to the bond rating agencies, the bond, our financial advisors, our legal. And so it pays all of those costs. We have to meet with the rating agencies, so there's costs associated with that. The cost associated with having a financial advisor, having Lindsay Rader do all of the work creating these, and all of that is allowed under law to be part of the bond cost, and that's why we put the $250,000. Based on the sizing of the bond, we probably will not need that full amount, but we put in the maximum amount that we think we would possibly need.
I have some questions, okay?
Yep.
I'm not going to hold you to them 100% right now. I'm just going to present them because I apologize. What I've always done is, I go through the agenda in the brief book, and I have questions, and I put them down. And not until this morning did I go, well, this is pretty detailed, and it might be something, instead of ambushing Pam at the table, which, we don't want to do. Of course, you don't get the best answers that way. I should have talked to you last week about it and asked you those questions. So I'm not going to really expect an immediate answer now. You may already have it, I don't know. But there were some inconsistencies that I thought existed between the budget, the CIP, and the bond that's being presented today.
Yes. So the budget and the CIP match. That those two documents do match because of council made changes at the table for the Board of Education to add those additional projects, move them from PAYGO, because we couldn't do the Glen Avenue parking lot as debt. So, and they also agreed that they didn't need as much debt for Mardella. So that was all the stuff that was moved. I believe we missed. There was $4.1 million added for the fuel farm in debt. I don't know for sure if that's in the CIP. The ruling document, the thing that controls is the budget.
Right.
Because if we don't have it in the budget, you can't do it. So that and the CIP does not match those changes that we just made. If council feels that the CIP needs to be adjusted, this is where I'll state this here at the table. Once we pass a CIP should be a planning document. It gives you a plan to move forward. From there, in the fiscal year that you're in, you should be adopting changes to your budget. We never go back and reissue a CIP in any given year. We say we amend it, but all of those projects were projects that were listed except for, yes, the Glen Avenue, but that's actually PAYGO. If council would like a resolution amending the CIP to match the budget, we can do that. I don't want to say I'm fine with that because I don't totally agree with the concept, but we can do that. But this is the items that we need debt issuance for. That we have moved up the timeline. Each year that I've been here, we have moved it up, and part of the reason that we have asked for this to actually be passed before the first reading to happen before even the new fiscal year is because of the fact that we are trying to close the funding end of October. It's the one item that we're bonding for the fuel farm, has a year lead time. So once we get the availability of cash, they're starting the process to do the bidding. But from the time we have the cash and we can go under contract, it's going to take us a year to get that item. And they need that within a year. So we have moved up the timeline. The current timeline has the first reading today, second reading, the second meeting in July. Then we have to wait the 60-day period so that then we can go to resolution in, I think it's September, timeline-wise. Then we will go to the bond market in October. The second meeting in October, we will do like we have done in the past, where we will be all, ourselves and the financial advisors will be here. We will open our bids, and we will ask council if you could reconvene in a secondary session later in the afternoon, probably about 2 o'clock. So you'll have your regular session at 10 a.m. We don't get our bids until 10 a.m. And then there's some back office stuff we have to get their earnest money sent. We've got to make sure all of their documents tie out and all that kind of stuff. So we can't, within the session that you guys are here, we can't pass it. We have to know that we can go back into session at 2 o'clock. The bond market does not like to wait until a 6 o'clock session to have it be adopted. So again, that's why we have the timeline. And then, so the second meeting in October, we would then close on these fundings at the end of October to allow us to start going under contract for the different projects in November.
The couple questions that I had, and one of them was in Mardella, the $2,100,000 on Mardella. Now the CIP, and I know it's a planning document, but the CIP for fiscal year 24 stated $6,769,000. So I'm wondering, is there going to be another bonding? It seems like it's an extremely different number.
So when we came to you during the budget process, we talked about the fact that the state had given additional funding for Mardella, and thus the amount that we needed in this fiscal year could be significantly reduced. And that is what allowed us to also to shift a couple things over to bonding to allow us to add that fifth project for them for the Glen Avenue parking lot. So their total request was less than we actually originally had. So we're saving on bonding and we're getting them an additional project. We will be evaluating during this fiscal year when we come out with the next CIP if there's still an additional need for the last year, possibly for a cash flow process, because there was one more year on the Mardella project in the CIP. So I reserve the right to say that it could still show up one more year, but that was what has always been stated in the CIP, is that there would be one more year. But their funding needs for this fiscal year per the Board of Education has significantly reduced.
Okay. Now, the other contradiction, and this could be a question for you, Ms. Hurley, because as you say, I don't really see where we would go in and take the necessary measures to do legislation to change the CIP, because it just doesn't happen, because we'd be doing that day and night. But
well, and that's what we have been doing. We've typically been doing them as one resolution at a time. So we have been stating it in the same one. We did not adopt that in the budget, and so we did not put the language in the budget that says we were amending the CIP. But that is what we have done in the past, is when
Sure.
we've come to you for a new project, we've amended the budget and the CIP.
Yeah. And-
Again.
And maybe it
The
is.
charter requires that we amend it.
Thank
It
you,
says,
Shirley.
charter requires that we amend the capital budget. It does not say that we have to amend the capital improvement plan, I believe.
Your capital budget for that fiscal year moving forward is supposed to be what your budget is. If it's not,
Yeah, but
then
what I'm saying is we have been stating in the resolution that we're amending the capital improvement plan and the capital budget. My view, my opinion, is that if we just said we amended the capital budget, we are meeting charter requirements. But, again, I will fight that one.
We'll see how we want that to play out.
Okay, but to stay on our timeline, this, first reading needs to be today, and public hearing would need to be in a second meeting in July.
Sometimes I think it's confusing if the public is reading, I don't know how many individuals read the CIP, but if they're looking at our capital improvement plan, if anyone is, and they say, oh, they're bonding $6.7 million from Ardell, and we put in $3 million.
So,
It might
again,
leave some.
the adoption of the budget, though, then changed that. The adoption of the budget has the capital budget in the back. It is the very last tab of or not even tab, the very last 2 pages of the budget that was adopted by the council.
I understand.
The budget is actually posted on the website, and so if you go back, it says 2024 capital budget, and it shows us that we have reduced that number.
Now, did I miss it on the roof for Y High? Because the CIP lists the Y High roof as a general obligation bond, but in the fiscal 24-year budget, it is listed as pay-go, and was approved, to my knowledge, it was approved as a $950,000 expense for pay-go. Now, I don't think I necessarily need that answer today.
I brought the budget with me. Give me 1 second,
All
and
right.
I'll see if I can, because again, I tabbed it, because it's the last page.
as she's looking for that, I can quote the section in the charter that references the capital program and budget. It says, items included in the budget, the portion of the cost of the capital program that must be paid for in the next fiscal year shall be the capital budget, and said capital budget shall be included in the expense budget for the next fiscal year.
And so that's what we did. We adopted the capital budget within the expense budget. There is a tab that says fiscal year '24, and we referenced it in the legislation.
Does capital budget refer to the capital budget in the budget itself, or are you thinking that the capital budget refers to the CIP?
It's both, really. I mean, so the CIP identifies a fiscal year, and this past one, it was fiscal year '24. And so that fiscal year '24 column should be what your fiscal year '24 budget, capital budget is. At this point, they don't match. Pam saying that,
So again, capital improvement plan is a plan. And Shane's heard this one from me when I was with the city of Salisbury. I preached this one there too. So the plan sets in place what you think you're going to do. The budget, as being referenced, the budget is what has been adopted and the council has agreed to fund. And so it states that in your budget document, you must reference it. We did. It is referenced. The CIP had the Board of Education's Y High roof as PAYGO. We moved that from PAYGO, from the CIP to the budget as general obligation bond. Because again, that was with the reduction of the Mardella. We moved 2 projects, Y High roof and Parkside roof, to general obligation bond out of PAYGO. So if you compare what was in the CIP, those were there, and then we also added the Glen Avenue parking. Again, if council would like a resolution to make the '24 CIP tie to the budget, we can do that. I don't believe it's necessary based on that language, but
Okay.
I will make my I've made my statement.
But Pam, if it's not tied to it, doesn't that, on the executive side, whoever the executive is, give them the open to
No.
spend the money any way they want?
No, because we can't spend for projects that the council hasn't approved. So because you've approved this
It'd have to be a
list,
project, because couldn't it be something else?
no, no, it has to be. So a capital project, you're funding with PAYGO money, and it has to be a project. Capital projects you're paying for with bonding money or money that we're getting from grants and from either federal government, state government, or another location. Those things, unless we use the language in a resolution to amend the budget, we can't spend it in a different way. This is what has been adopted. This is what council has agreed for the money to be spent as. A CIP is issued at the beginning of, we give it to you in December. Yes, it is specifically stated in the charter that we give you a CIP. We give you a CIP to give you an idea of what we think we have to spend over the next 5 years. When we create the budget, we give you the column, the first column, and it may be amended. It may have a different thing in there because we either feel we can't afford it, projects have changed, things have happened since that time that this has become more of a priority or not. It has been listed to you, given to you, and given you information to show you that we're not, you have all the information as to how we think we need to fund and what things we need to fund.
As we adopted the budget at $950,000 in PAYGO,
It's $950,000. You adopted the budget as $950,000 as a bond.
John just
I
said it
think
was in
he said-
PAYGO.
That's what I thought. I'm looking at the proposed capital
So-
budget.
And so what is online has the amended document, and the amended document is highlighted, showing that we've moved that to debt.
For some reason, I don't remember having that discussion.
I don't either.
It was given to you guys in the adjustments, and we had the conversation when the Board of Education was here that we were reducing this number, we're shifting these over and adding the Glen Avenue.
That was before it was adopted, so, I mean, it was like through the process that change was done.
Yes.
We had a list of about 8 items that we were amending, and
that was-
that we made a motion. Was this part of one of those?
No, there was no motion because it was through the process.
Okay.
And I believe the motion actually had language that also stated changes to, and I'm not sure I have the motion language with me, and changes to the capital budget as necessary.
So what happened to the 950 that was in PAYGO that went moved to bonding? Where did
It's
we-
just, it has gone from PAYGO to bond. We haven't made it double. We're only asking for $950,000. And again, if you look at the total that we had looked at in the CIP for bonding, even with now having 3 projects that we're bonding, we're actually bonding less because of the reduction of the Mardella. And the reduction of the Mardella still keeps the project on. I don't want anybody to hear it thinking, well, we're reducing Mardella. No, this was a request by the Board of Education. It continues the funding and it continues the construction on plan. We're not reducing anything because we're cutting something out that was intended to be there.
That was my question. The 950 that we moved from PAYGO, we moved it to bond.
Correct.
What's the 950 going to be spent on now?
That's where council agreed to add their fifth project, which was the Glen Avenue parking lot.
Okay.
They had asked to add the 5th project. Glen Avenue parking lot, due to bonding, and we're bonding these things for 20 years. Roofs last 20 years. Parking lots don't last 20 years. It doesn't make fiscal sense for the county to borrow money to bond a parking
A
lot.
few years ago, we borrowed money in this, it makes sense, I agree with you. We borrowed money to buy carpet, and I thought that was ridiculous because
Now,
carpet doesn't last
I
20
will-
years either.
Now, I will readily
Well,
admit,
anyway.
in an overall capital project, if you are outfitting a building, you may have the costs of furniture and
This is a
fixtures.
replacement.
But, so, again, kind of using as an example, we purposefully did not bond for the furniture and fixtures at the public safety building because those don't have a 20-year life. The only things that we're bonding are fuel farm, runway extension for the airport, and then 3 projects at the Board of Education: Mardella renovation, Y-High roof, and Parkside roof. They all have 20-year lives. So again, they make sense for us on a fiscal responsibility note. It doesn't make sense, again, it wouldn't make sense for us to bond for police cruisers and, be paying for those for 20 years. And we're now on vehicle number 5 since we've borrowed for that. That is the one thing that I try to do while looking at this is what is the most fiscal sense. We need all of these projects, but they don't need to be bonded, or they don't make fiscal sense to bond because their lifespan is less than the term of the bond that we're paying.
So the notes that I also made in reference to Parkside Roof, where the CIP in the budget listed the $1.3 million as pay-go.
That one moved
That
during.
one moved also?
Yes, that one moved during the adoption. Again, if you go on the county website, we have now loaded the county budget, and the very last 2 pages of that have those projects moved.
Okay, I don't always pay attention. I don't always pay attention, but I just don't recall 1.3 million and then 950,000 being
And
discussed in the process.
They're even highlighted on that last page. And
On what last page?
in the budget that's adopted.
That's been adopted.
That's been
Yeah,
adopted.
but I don't think I've looked at that yet. When was that posted online? A while back?
Beginning of last week.
Yeah, I kind of expect to get an email and then I know it's there, right? But unless I'm wrong, I don't have the only thing I have to look at is proposed, but I don't
and when
remember
I-
those discussions.
But when I gave council, I also gave council the pages that were changing. And those pages were in what you were provided.
We just posted online as well. We did not send that out in an email to council, but it is posted on our council page as well.
I understand, I just don't, yeah. Okay, yeah, I still don't get it. I just don't get this idea of what you say of what you had listed and highlighted as how that is different from a motion that would be necessary at this table to
I don't have the
adjust.
language, I seriously don't have the language, but it was stated in there with the appropriate, because again, we were making changes to the Board of Education on the MOE side of things. We also stated in the motion and the corresponding changes to the capital budget. I believe those, because I helped write that motion, and I believe it was in there. And again, it's not like I gave council, I gave council these pages, I had those lines highlighted, that they were changing to showcase the fact that those weren't what had originally gone through the CIP.
Maybe on our part, we should have included that in a formal motion, I don't know. That's all right. It was a difficult budget session because we were in the middle of the collective bargaining as well as the budget. It really was a time restraint for me.
So I'm sorry if it was not clear. I did highlight it. I did, again, it is out on the website highlighted because I left those on the pages just so that people could see that it had changed from the original budget from the proposed budget, not the original budget, the proposed budget to the adopted.
Great, all right. Yes,
I have a
Shane.
question. It's not about what we're talking, because I understand the CIP thing. If you don't use all the money in these projects, bond projects, could happen in the city, don't you have to go back to, say you want to have found another project that could use
Council
excess
has to
money,
approve that.
and you have to approve it? You don't have to go through the bond person?
So, one of the items that were on the most recent referendum was something that Lindsay Rader had proposed, and it passed. It gave in the past, we have not had an easy time being able to reallocate bond funds that haven't been used. Our charter did not allow it easily. It was and so then you're left with these bond funds that you have sitting there that you can't easily spend. The referendum put in language that actually makes it, so if there's money left, I would have to ask Lindsay, because I don't know the answer to the question. For old bonds that were passed under the other legislation, I don't know that answer. But I know with the new bonds, this set, anything that doesn't get spent in this new bonding period would have the ability for us in future, 2-3 years down the road, if the project is done and there's still money available, we could come back to council and ask for that to be reallocated. We would not have to go to the bond market for any of that. It would save us money in the future on future bondings. So the referendum item that was passed gave additional flexibility to council to spend the money that has already previously been borrowed and not borrow more if there's money left over.
Previously, if there was money left over from a bonded project, could that leftover money be paid back to reduce the bond?
I don't have that answer. We had, some of our language made it very, very difficult to do anything than just kind of leave it sit there and us pay it back until the bond kind of like is done.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
That seemed to be the common sense thing to do.
well, but
You didn't use
again,
it.
going back to charter,
Reduce
if
your bond.
if the charter doesn't allow it, you can't do it. So that's what the referendum that passed in this past year and allows us to have more flexibility with bond funds for projects that are complete and there's money still left over.
That's what we did. We had the 1.2 million left over, and that's how the Cody Cox project became. We use it for that. So if you have, say, $500,000, you could go back in your CIP and see what project would cost to me.
And I mean, we monitor each project. We monitor the money remaining in bonds. Now that referendum has passed, I do need to ask some questions of Lindsay as to whether or not it is only for going forward or going back. And for the ones that are going back, if I can't do it under that referendum, what is my path?
Okay. Any other questions? All those in favor of the introduction of legislative bill number 2023-07, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. The introduction passes unanimously. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Ms. Owen. Next item on the agenda, we have the introduction of legislative bill number 2023-08. Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, this is an act to amend Chapter 138 of the Wicomico County Code titled Electrical Standards, Article 1 titled General Provisions, and Article 3 titled Registration of Electricians and Inspections. And Mr. Illuminati is here to deal with any questions.
Entertain a motion from council to introduce legislative bill number 2023-08. Moved. Second.
Second.
Any discussion for Mr. Illuminati? All those in favor of the introduction of legislative bill 2023-08, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion is carried. Introduction passes unanimously.
And this is legislative bill 2023-09, an act to amend Chapter 138 of Wicomico County Code titled Electrical Standards, Article 2, titled Registration of Electricians and Inspections, Section 138-24, titled Inspections, Permits, and Chapter 141 of the Code titled Fees, and Section 141.3, titled Department of Planning, Zoning, and Community Development. And Mr. Illuminati is here for that.
Entertain a motion from council to introduce legislative bill number 2023-09.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Questions? All those in favor of the introduction, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. The introduction of legislative bill 2023-09 passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. At this time, we open the floor for public comments. If you have any public comments you'd like to make, come to the podium, please. State your name, your county of residence, and your concern.
Good morning. My name is Jared Cooper. I'm a resident of Wicomico County. I've been with Emergency Services Fire Department for 27 years. The only thing that I'm asking the council for, and I sent all of you an email on the 7th of June with all the instructions, is to request from the Maryland Institute of Emergency Medical Services Systems a SWOT analysis for Wicomico County Emergency Services. And what that'll do is give us a plan on how to make it better. We just concluded one at the beginning of this year with Somerset County, and we presented that in February or March to them. Took about a year. And what that does is the highest fire and EMS officials of the county departments get together and we go over the plan and how to make it better. So everything is in your email and what you need to do.
Right.
And I can resend that to you, and I also sent that to the county exec as well.
Great. Yeah, we appreciate you doing that. We appreciate you following up here today, and we'll certainly get back to you with a response, and hopefully it's something we might be able to put together for the next meeting.
Yes, sir. It's no cost to the county. It's a free service. We do all the work, and like I said, it includes GIS mapping, everything else data-wise that we can come present to you guys a plan to make your system better. Because unfortunately, the administration of the county, we've been trying to get them to push this, and it hasn't happened. So that's why I'm here.
Great. All right, Mr. Cooper. Thank you very
All right,
much
I
for coming
appreciate
in.
it. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Any other public comments? I think what we'll do is we'll go into council comments. Mr. Atkins he had public comments, right?
Yes, he did.
All right. Well, what we'll do is we'll go into council comments, and before we adjourn, we'll wait and see where he is. Any council comments? Josh?
I'll just say, of course, one of the items earlier was just approving more agricultural easements. It's always important to be able to make sure that our county stays an agricultural county in many ways. So going through that process with farmers who have said that they want to make sure that the generations behind them can continue to farm that land. That's really admirable, and so it's great to be able to see 300 plus acres now for the county. That's really great. Also say that we did have a discussion about the COVID deaths. I've brought this up before. I do think it's maybe we should consider some sort of I don't know if there's any kind of memorial. Other jurisdictions are talking about that, but 367 people at least in Wicomico County, of course, died from COVID. If there was some sort of way to acknowledge that in some sort of small, or in some sort of way that could be meaningful, that could be. Some folks are doing gardens, or some people are doing just other reflection areas or something along those lines. I think that could be helpful. And then last thing I did want to say, I didn't mention it while our health officer is here, but there actually is a part of the issues that we've had, especially when it comes to a lot of our issues of the health department interacting with the county, interacting with the state, is just comes down to data and database systems. There's a new book out that's Recoding America, Jennifer Palka, so I'm reading it right now, but it's really focused on trying to make sure that we have efficient systems of government so that all taxpayer dollars are being spent efficiently, and that we know how to, I think there's something that we could certainly dive into that a lot more for our county. But Recoding America, check it out, good book.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say this. On Saturday, I went to visit a friend. I hadn't seen her in a while, and I said, well, I'm going to visit her. And in the backyard next door to her, there was a landfill. I mean, literally, it looked like a landfill, her neighbor's house. This particular friend is 84 years old, and I don't know if she was afraid to call. But I'm going to still push for code enforcement officer, the need for one. And if anyone's out there in TV land, many neighborhoods don't have HOAs and neighborhood associations. So some neighborhoods really need the help of making their neighborhood look good. Because she's a homeowner, and see the trash I saw, I couldn't believe it. And I think that people need to realize they have to get rid of their trash, their tires, to untag cars. Now we're having campers putting in people's yards, living in them, and also the storage sheds people put in the back. And this particular, I just happened to go by and visit somebody else Saturday, and I saw the camper push straight up to a nice house, and people were getting water, and then there's a house in the back, and the neighbor said that someone's living there. So this, I don't want to become a code enforcement officer, to me, but things come to my attention, and I think if we want our county and our towns to be a place where people want to live, we need to take very serious look at how people are living and make sure we educate people what they can and cannot do in our community. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilman Shields. Councilman Merritt?
I'd just like to say thank you to our health officer, Mr. McConaughey. That was a very comprehensive report, and it's good to hear that he's getting a lot of collaboration from other departments and people. I sat on the interview panel when that process was going on, and he's very capable. Glad to have him on board.
Much. That concludes council comments. Mr. Atkins, I think you had a public comment you wanted to make?
Thank you. Certainly didn't mean to hold up the meeting. I had to go pay the meter. Just a few comments I want to make. Jim Atkins, Barron Creek Road, Mardella. Concerning Barron Creek Road, we talked about it before, and I just want to run through a few things. As I've said before, I'm not a politician. I say what I mean. Sometimes people take it the wrong way, so please don't take it the wrong way if you think it's directed at you, because it isn't. Since January the 3rd this year, I've addressed the council numerous times concerning Barron Creek Road. I've made an open invitation to council to either talk to me or visit the road to see my concerns, of which several members have done, and I appreciate that. Other members may not have visited, but they have spoken to me about it. So again, I appreciate that. I'd just like to take a minute to review some of the highlights of statements that have been made in the council meeting in the previous 6 months. Barron Creek Road is needed for fire, EMS, and police. If this is a true concern, why are we now approaching 7 years that road has not been repaired? Apparently, it's not a concern. The dispatchers for the Sheriff's Department, the Maryland State Police, and Fire EMS dispatch and having their systems accordingly to approach from either Route 50 or Route 54. So it's not a problem for those people. We were asked in here, has State Highway been consulted due to traffic concerns? The reply was no. We're only placing a road that was already there. So if that is true, why is the Department of Transportation for the state of Maryland now being asked to assist with designing the road? Fiscal year 2023, there was $800,000 allocated for Barron Creek Road. $253,000 was spent on design and architectural drawings. Since the first meeting I asked on February the 7th of where are the plans and the drawings, I haven't seen them yet. Have any of you? Council was told that the road was not a high priority and that nothing would happen for at least another year as state and federal grants were being sought after. However, at that meeting, there was a person on the Zoom conference who stated that Barron Creek Road was a hot issue. Well, is it a hot issue or is it not? How can you apply for a grant when you don't have an estimated cost? Statement was made, concerns about the county's liability if someone was injured. Since that concern was expressed, has there been anything done to prevent someone from being injured or reduce the county's liability? No. Most recently, the county executive sent a letter to the Secretary of Transportation for the state of Maryland. The letter was titled Wicomico County Priority Letter. In the introduction of the letter, it was stated, and I quote, "The projects contained in this priority letter have been reviewed and endorsed by the county executive and council by a resolution. A copy of the signed resolution has been included as part of this submittal," end quote. Where is the council resolution? I haven't seen it. Maybe I missed it, but I haven't seen it. If there was a resolution, what was the vote? And why was a copy of that not attached to the letter that was supplied to the council briefing book? If it did happen, where's the record of it? It also written in this letter to the state that funding was requested to retain professional consulting services, engineering, professional consulting services. So does that mean that the $253,000 that was spent last year on architectural drawings was performed by an unprofessional company? Traffic patterns at Old Railroad Road and Route 50 are in the process of being changed to eliminate the direct crossing of Route 50 at Old Railroad. If Barron Creek Road is rebuilt, where do you think all the traffic is going to move to? They'll then have an option of using Old Railroad Road and Route 50, where they cannot cross Route 50. They have to use right-hand turns and jug handles, or they have to go to the stoplight and wait for the stop traffic light to change. Which route do you think they're going to take? Many times at council meetings, I've heard either council members or department heads state that rules and regulations and costs are being dictated to the county by the state, and that there's nothing that can be done about it. Well, if that's the truth, why is the county now going to the state to ask for money to fix a road that it doesn't need? The county had money 7 years ago to repair this road, and for 7 years they haven't done it. So apparently it's not needed. It's time to make a stand, folks. Make a decision, fix the road properly or close the road properly. Stop pushing this can down the road. There needs to be transparency concerning this project, and it seems to me over the past 6 months that there isn't much transparency, but rather comments being made which lead people to believe nothing is happening concerning this project, while on the other hand, it appears as though steps are being taken through either state or federal funding to circumvent the council's decisions. I hope this isn't really the case, but it appears to be. Let's make a decision on Barron Creek Road, get it on the record so you can stop listening to me talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
John?
Yes,
Yeah,
Joe.
I'd like to say.
Sure.
I want to thank everybody for coming today. The past year or so, maybe more, this council person, and I'm sure some of the other council members, have heard complaints about the bike paths in Salisbury. It's, it's probably one of the hottest, we talk about hot topics, Mr. Atkins, this is probably one of the ones that over the years, if I had them all together, I've heard more about that than anything. And then we have what's called the parking lot next to the library being torn up. That's created another, generated a lot more interest. County Council has nothing to do with the city as far as what they do with their streets, as far as putting in bike lanes or as far as tearing up parking lots or whatever they want to do. We have received emails lately about them selling the parking lots to build more buildings. Again, the county council has no input into that, whether they can do it or can't do it. That's their decision. However, the county council does have one thing that past actions have probably enhanced the idea of maybe selling those parking lots and basically, I'll call it dangling the carrot of the Horizon project in front of developers where they would get tax breaks if they did buy those parking lots and build those buildings. So I don't know whether we can revisit that now, and I think Mrs. Hurley could probably check on that. I know we have a three-year window to revisit it anyway, but I would suggest that the council look into revisiting the Horizon project, Horizon Zone, whether we want to continue to give those tax breaks, because that just does enhance more tax breaks for people that are not going to be paying taxes while the rest of the citizens in Wicomico County are. So I'm going to ask Mrs. Hurley if she'll look into that. I appreciate it.
I will.
Thank you.
Joe, any other council comments? Under presidential comments, I'd like to say that I had the opportunity to be present at the Corporal Hilliard dedication on Stephen Decatur Highway, Route 611. It was a really nice event where it was allowing the public to actually be reminded that Corporal Hilliard gave his life in the line of duty, not only just to those who are in Wicomico County, but those who are driving through Worcester County as well would see that sign and, question, well, who is this? What's that all about? So it was a really great dedication, as well as a candlelight visual in Pittsville that night. Jeff helped put that together, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff. That is along with the other 3,000 projects you have. But that was an excellent visual. I'll tell you, it was really kind of interesting as it was wrapping up and they let off the sirens to signify the moment in which the tragedy occurred. It wasn't within about a minute later that it started to rain, just lightly, and that lasted for about 5 minutes, and then it was over. It was a very special night. Also recognized Ralph Seaton's end of service in Willards. He's done quite a bit of time down in Willards, longer than Joe and I combined on the council. That's how long.
Nobody will recognize that name.
Excuse me?
Ralph Seaton. It was Speedy Seaton.
Speedy, I'm sorry, Joe.
Nobody's going to recognize that name.
Sometimes you throw me, Joe. It make me a little nervous sometimes. So as Ralph Speedy Seaton in Willards has dedicated so many years of his life to the community there, as well as Stanford Robinson and Mardella for his many, many years of service with the fire company. So we appreciate all those great efforts made on the part of all the individuals that help make our county such a great place in which to live. Moving forward here, I'm going to get back to where I'll make sure, okay, I have a special, yeah, I knew there was always something special to read. So the proclamation for the Parkside baseball team, as we said earlier, that'll be presented at our next meeting in July. And our next meeting in July will be July 5th at 6 o'clock, not July 4th. It's rather obvious. So I entertain a motion from council to adjourn from legislative session to go into open work sessions, followed by a closed work session pursuant to the general provisions, Article Section 3-305B1, to discuss the appointment of a local management board director to protect the privacy of the individual. It's a motion. Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Legislative meeting is adjourned. First item on the open work session is a letter of support for Tidal Health. We have with us the Mr. Chris Hall, Vice President and Chief Business Officer of Strategy and Community. Hang on a second, I lost my place. It's a long title, Mr. Hall. Vice President, Chief Business Officer, Strategy and Business Development. Thank you. Good to have you here.
Well, thank you, President Cannon and council members. I'll just give a real brief overview. So this is a letter of support for a project that, as you can see in the agenda, on East Church Street. We're working with the Department of Housing and Community Development to seek a seed grant to do some revitalization and redevelopment there. Just a brief history on this project. Back in 1897, Dr. Todd had a vision for, legend has it, that the horses were tired going out to visit members of the county in this region. So he built a hospital right over here on Fitzwater and Main Street, and then ultimately relocated to where it is today. That innovation continues today with the development of a graduate medical education program that is happening in Salisbury, but also in some of our other outlying organizations like in Seaford, et cetera. We started with internal medicine. So if you think about it, these are individuals who went through 4 years of undergraduate, 4 years of medical school, and then while you're a doctor after medical school, you have to go through residency training before you can practice. So we started internal medicine residency. We have the first 10 students that are here now, doctors that are here now. In July, the second group of 10, so it's a 3-year program. So then next year after that, it'll be the third grouping will come through. So it'll be 30 internal medicine residents. We have general surgery that's starting this summer. We have several others on the docket as well as in addition to some fellowship programs, which is the next level of training. And we'll do that around the cardiac program since we have a very strong cardiology and cardiothoracic program here in Salisbury. So with the internal medicine residents, they are currently practicing at the H. Gray Reeves building, but as I mentioned, there's a 3-year program of 10 students in each class, so that's 30 doctors who are going to be training, and that space will soon outgrow very fast. So we've been working to redevelop the Hotel Esther, as everybody knows it, right there on Church Street. Now, the beauty of this project, it's not only a community clinic for the residents, but it's also going to have a lot of what we call wraparound services, behavioral health, financial counseling, social workers, et cetera, working with our population health division to help to improve the social determinants of health, specifically in that neighborhood. So it's really a win-win. So it gives it a place for the residents to provide the primary care, but also to provide other services that are not readily available within that community specifically. So this is a redevelopment program and project of that entire lot. The beauty is, at the end of the day, while the structure itself cannot sustain a program of this size, the redevelopment of it's going to make it look just like it is now, a Victorian home. It'll be a single story, but it'll have the turrets and the community room, and it's got some wonderful features to continue to look like the community. So I'll pause there if anybody has any questions.
Would you feel this would take pressure off the emergency room at Tidal Health? Because
So,
it seems to be an issue right now.
Yeah,
A lot of
and
folks.
unfortunately in the state of Maryland, I don't see that changing significantly. Longer story, if we have another 4 hours, I can be happy to update you on that. But yes, because many of the, it's got to be close to about 40 to 50% of the visits are not emergency room visits. So this will provide an outlet of care for individuals that can be treated without having the ability to walk to the emergency room to receive more or less primary care.
And for the council, this has been in front of Planning and Zoning Commission twice now and received favorable reviews in front of Planning and Zoning. So everybody seems to be good with what's going on.
I just want to say that I knew the building as a little girl because my church was there, and I always thought that the house was a castle, you know, the big house with the little steeples. And I'm happy to hear that you're not going to change too much of it, because I don't even know if you have to go through the historical trust.
No, it's-
There's a group that is working through the historical side, but I don't think it's a designated site, so.
Yeah, see, yeah, it should have historical significance of the neighborhood. But I'm glad you're not going to change.
They're going to tear it down.
But
Now, you
then
know.
to rebuild, it's going to look very.
Yeah, but
You're
they're
not gonna
tearing the
tear the
building.
building down, or
Yeah, they're tearing it.
Yeah, they're
Has to
raising
be.
it,
It
yeah.
cannot support.
you're going to tear the building down?
Has to. The history of that building is, has an interesting past, and most recently, it's been vacated and gutted, and it's not
It's been vacant a
sustainable.
while, but you're going to tear it down.
Has to be, yeah. The foundations can't support the use of what's here, and that's why the redevelopment of the look will make it look just very similar, not just like.
Sorry about that.
I think the primary,
I like the idea, but I'm just kind of upset they're going to tear the building down.
I think the primary idea is it gives it an additional alternative, and the location is certainly beneficial to the population you're trying to reach out to. So, the council members do have a copy of the letter in the brief book, so I guess the purpose of this in the work session is to get a consensus if we're okay to send the letter to Secretary Day.
Yes.
Everybody good? All right, we'll get that out. Thank you, Mr. Hall, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, man, mercy.
Next item on the agenda is a discussion of the zoning text amendment. Mr. Gary Pusey is here. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Good to see you.
Good to see all of you. Okay, so I know you have most of the items that you need, but I do have a handout, if that's appropriate to do at work sessions, which will kind of summarize a lot more of what we're trying to do. Oh, thanks, Laura. So what we have before you, an application has been submitted by two property owners in the county, Jerry and Joan Matico, to amend the zoning code, and they're represented by an attorney, Michael Krausen. Part of the code that they want to amend is that section that addresses parcels that are split by zoning district boundary lines, so that a parcel has more than one zoning district on it. And I'll wait till Laura's done. So the handout that Laura just gave all of you kind of summarizes what happened. At the top is how the code currently reads. And basically, the code makes a distinction for parcels of 2 acres in size. For a lot that has 2 acres or less, that has 2 zoning districts on it, the zoning regulations that are applicable to that zone, which covers most of that lot, are what shall apply to the entire lot. So if you have a 2-acre lot, 1.5 acres are zoned residential and 1/2 acre is zoned commercial, then only the residential regulations apply to that lot. The commercial doesn't apply at all. If you have a parcel that's greater than 2 acres in size with 2 different zones, then each zone applies. So if you have a 5-acre lot that's 3 acres in, say, residential, 2 acres in commercial, the residential district will apply to the 3 acres and the commercial to the other 2 acres. It's kind of a confusing situation, and it's not really what we try to do in zoning. It's generally not good practice to have parcels split by zoning district boundary lines. So the applicants did file this application, and the basic change is that 2-acre distinction would go away. And I'm going to skip over what they actually asked for, or maybe I'll just briefly summarize. So they got rid of the 2 acres, and they said that the zoning regulations applicable to the zone, which covers the largest portion of the lot, may apply if the Planning Commission approves a site and landscaping plan. And that's for non-residential uses only. The staff reviewed the application. We went to the Planning Commission. Whenever a text amendment is proposed, the Planning Commission has to hold a public hearing. They make a recommendation to the County Council. The County Council also holds a public hearing, and then you make the decision as to whether it's approved or not. So the Planning Commission and the staff first, and then the Planning Commission considered what they were asking for, and we recommended, and the Planning Commission agreed, that what the applicants submitted, we were going to revise it, and the applicants were okay with what we recommended and what the Planning Commission also recommended. So I'll just mostly skip over the second part. No one other than the applicant showed up at the public hearing before the Planning Commission, so we didn't have any opposition for that. What we recommended and what the Planning Commission supported was that the 2 acres would go away, as the applicants were proposing, and the portion of the lot that covers, or the zoning that covers the largest portion of the lot would apply across the whole, or may apply for the whole lot. So it kind of gives an option to the property owners. They may extend that zoning district that covers the largest portion over the entire lot, or if they don't want to do that, they can develop in accordance with both zoning districts. So it does give some flexibility to the property owner. So we looked at the zoning map in the county, and there's about 65 properties that have this situation of 2 zoning districts splitting a parcel. Now, a lot of those probably wouldn't have any impact by this proposed amendment, because a lot of the times the two districts that are on a parcel are very similar in nature. For example, both of them are some type of residential district or some type of commercial district or some type of industrial district. So really, they were kind of compatible as it is. In addition, so actually there were 27 that had 2 residential districts on a parcel, 2 that had commercial, and about 5 that had industrial. So if you add those up, that's more than half of the 65. 2 properties were already developed, so this probably wouldn't affect them at all. And actually, Wicomico County and Warwick Community College own another 9. So we're talking about 45 of the 65 properties probably would not be affected at all by this amendment. But it does give some flexibility to property owners. The Planning Commission and staff felt that the standards that are applicable in the zoning code for landscaping, screening, that sort of thing, would protect adjoining properties from anything that possibly could be proposed. So that kind of summarizes what the request is. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Yes.
Thank you. I guess going forward, are we still going to have, do we still have the rules that allow for 2 zoning districts within one parcel?
Yes, because if you go along with what the Planning Commission recommended, it would say
May.
Thank you. May, so that gives the option to the property owner. They could apply the whole district of whichever one covers the majority of the district to the whole property, or they could do it the way the code kind of reads now, may apply.
And then how did it, I guess, is that a normal thing? How does it get to that point where you have one parcel in 2 different district or zoning districts?
I think we looked at all of them. I think some of them may just be sort of zoning map mistakes that have been made through the years, where they just kind of tried to draw a straight line in some areas and it would split some parcels. A lot of these are located along Brick Kiln Road, where the railroad used to be, and they measured back from the railroad many years ago. It's either 600 or 1,000 feet, and it just split a lot of properties along that entire corridor. That's where most of them are. It also happened again up north on either side of the railroad along Route 13. And in some other areas of the county, it followed a natural boundary like a creek.
And last question is, just you don't foresee any negative unforeseen consequences or anything like that if we were to move forward with this? There's nothing, are there any issues there that we need to think through? Or?
We do not see any. If, for example, you have a parcel that's, say, industrial and residential, you have the standards that apply in the code for landscaping. And also, we did see areas of the county where industrial zoning is adjacent to residential districts anyway. So, yeah, we don't see any unforeseen. Thank you.
Questions? No? Yeah, it's nice to see, honestly, when we have the wherewithal, like, to propose new legislation that recognizes and tries to help correct inconsistencies or ineffective restrictions and regulations and code. So it's nice to see these positive measures being taken and less restrictive measures being taken. So
Yes.
I guess what we're looking at here is
It would come back in a legislative bill form.
okay.
We could have that bill ready for introduction on July 5th.
Great. That was very quick. Thank you.
Can I ask one?
Is that okay with council members? We're okay with this, right? Have this move forward? Yeah.
If someone selects to change, would there be a zoning map amendment?
No.
They just announce the change somehow?
Well, it's just written in the code like that, you know, what zoning would apply. So it doesn't actually change the map. It's just changing the text of the zoning ordinance. I do think that in the future, and President Cannon kind of alluded to it, when we do our comprehensive plan update in the future and come back and look at the map, I think a lot of these will look at those and make sure they run along property lines. But we're not rezoning any properties at this time.
But what if the person makes the selection that they want to go with the one or the other? It's not going to show up anywhere.
No, it'll be part of this. It's just part, they're following the requirements of the zoning code as is.
Okay.
I mean, that kind of exists now with the code, just not to the extent that we're doing it here.
Other questions? No? All right, Mr. Pusey, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
We will get that ready for the next meeting.
Very good.
Next item on the agenda is the work session on the priority letter for the Maryland Department of Transportation. I know Mr. Rudy's here and Ms. Langford's here. I don't see Mr. Hall. I do see Ms. Carter, and we have Mr. Dave Ryan here. I guess we have chairs.
Is that an invitation?
Certainly. I know it wasn't in writing, but. So this is pretty much part of what we do annually with the Maryland Department of Transportation. I know we met with them at the dinner not too long ago. I guess since the first item's on the agenda in reference to the regional airport, I would if you would like to take the lead, Mr. Rudy? Thank you.
Good morning. So we listed 7 projects this year that we're looking to get support for. The runway extension, which you're all aware of, I believe. Our fuel farm, which we're going to be needing to replace here very shortly. Air traffic control tower upgrade. This is an upgrade to the equipment that is used in the control tower. A lot of it's very old and aging and needs to be replaced. We had a study done identifying those components. Fire suppression in our technology park, that would be necessary to develop large building hangars over in that area. Taxiway F, design and construction. So this is an extension of a taxiway that comes off kind of on the southern portion of the airport and would be parallel to our secondary runway, and this would allow for future hangar development on kind of on the southeast side of the airport. Taxiway B rehabilitation. This pavement is it's old, it's aging, it's deteriorating, and it will need some attention in the next few years. And lastly is an airline and FBO hangar to kind of facilitate Piedmont Airlines maintenance with our aircraft maintenance technician school going in. We're hoping to backfill some of those jobs that Piedmont has lost over the years and help to expand their maintenance program, and also to free up some space possibly to be used for a future fixed-based operator at the airport.
Any questions from council members? All right. Next item on the outside of the airport, the next item we have is on road and facility improvements.
Yeah, this transportation letter, there are only 4 new items within this package. It's Barron Creek Road, West Side Collector, Port of Salisbury, and the additional airport projects. I don't know if you guys have any questions concerning them. I know there's probably a lot regarding 2 of them, but basically we send this out to every jurisdiction, and whatever they send back, we put on for review.
Questions from anyone? Yes, Josh.
I guess the obvious, Barron Creek Road design alternatives. So I personally don't think this should be a part of this, or should be on here, but I guess what's the process? So this moves forward and...
So the process, if it were to move forward, we'd have the public hearing and then a resolution. After that, it would be sent to local delegations and in concurrence with response to the state with letters of support. And then we send a letter to the Secretary of MDOT. So basically, it's their CIP, and we're just putting like a little idea in their heads that this is something that we would like to see support on. It doesn't mean it has to be completed. It's just something that is been brought to our attention to really look into for improvements.
Yes, Shane.
Is it an improvement to be used?
It's an improvement. It depends. That's what the study would be on. Would it be more feasible to have it, to not have it? It's basically trying to see what is the best options and being able to present it as both options or one or the other. So this funding would be able to allow us to investigate more into what is most beneficial.
Because it's been closed for a while.
Sure.
And it seems like it hasn't caused a detriment to really anybody. To me, I mean, from what I investigated, and I did talk to the Atkins, I did go down there and see it. There's 2 homes on that road. And I don't know if you heard anything from like the emergency vehicles couldn't do their job. So,
I've heard mixed on that.
I mean, you
Yeah.
know, I'm saying, you know, I haven't heard anything. I think if they wanted it open, I think we should be hearing from them.
Yeah, and again, it's not to actually complete the project. It's more to have the funding to look into the pros and cons so that we can better present it and basically know what the best improvement is.
What did we spend the $250,000 on?
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I already looked into this. So we had several engineers in on this. We had geotechnical, so we have 90% plans, and then topographic surveys, property line surveys, easement plats, geotech, state and federal permitting, forest conservation, hydrology and hydraulics. There was archaeological studies that were completed because of some findings that they had. There were some feeder fish that came in, so they were trying to decide between a bridge, but it can only be a certain height before it was considered, you know, a different kind of permit. Then they looked at 2 culverts, but then those fish could no longer get over there. But by the time that everything was sort of dammed up again, it bred these fish back in. And then you also have to take into consideration that due to the length of time that this erosion's happened and the water is slowly washing things away, now we have more of a different kind of structural feasibility to look at as well. So
By the time we get around to doing it again, it'll probably change again.
it may, yeah.
Yeah, I have, I
Be a different
apologize, 'cause
fish.
in reference to Mr. Atkins' request, we did receive 3 documents. One was from KCI Engineers, the other one was a county document, and the third one was a document from MDE, which sort of gave everybody a good idea of what had been looked at previously. So I will forward that to the council members, and I attempted to send it to you, Mr. Atkins, but your email kind of messed up, so I'll need to get it from you after the meeting. But I'll share that with the council members, so.
Mr. Luffman actually shared that last week, I believe, so they.
So it was copied to the rest of the council? Okay, thank you, Mr. Early. Solves that problem. I'll get it to you, Mr. Atkins. Yeah, I think the key thing here is that it's sort of like planning initiatives, sort of trying to see whether or not they would be willing to do feasibility studies. And that would probably come into play, Councilman Shields, as to whether or not the fire safety was compromised. Because I know I've heard that there is an issue where in a sense, they sort of have to get used to it because it's not there. So now whether or not it is something where it's caused a problem, we don't know that or not. Whether it's a problem with school buses as well, as whether they've just gotten used to alternate routes There are a few things that come into play there, but I've heard both sides of the story in many occasions. This may help give us some clarification. So if you want, would you want to continue?
What else would you like to know?
Well,
But
yeah, I mean, we see what it is. There's the Barron Creek, there's the Port of Salisbury, West
sure.
Side Collector.
Are there any other questions? I'm not sure if West Side Collector is going to come up as one before I pass it over to Mr. Dave Ryan for the Port of Salisbury, but that'll be his topic. But are there any other topics besides that one and a few maybe others
Anybody?
that he could be touching on that I can help with?
Yes, Josh.
I will say, so I'm not really sure exactly how this road would be a part of this, but I've said it many times before, and I'll say it again. Any large city that is a productive city usually has a circumferential highway connecting, some sort of bypass that goes all the way around at 695, 495, you name it, et cetera. We need to be securing those easements and securing that space to build that 50 years from now or 20 years from now, depending on what, but one way or another, that needs to be a part of our thought process. And it's not, from what I've heard and seen in our planning, that's not currently been the case. I personally would think that that's really important for us to continue to do that for the long term.
Josh, do you mean, as opposed to what they're talking about as far as ingress and egress, whatever, are you talking about extending the bypass even further?
Yeah, so the question of whether or not, and we've barely talked about this on the Metropolitan Planning Organization or other situations where I'm in, how do you connect to the two? Currently, we have 3/4 of a circumferential highway. We probably need to make that connection at some point in time. So slightly separate from this, I mean, this could be a part of that equation. I think that was what's coming in the past is, could the West Side Collector be a part of that future full connection, but we really do we as a county need to make sure that we're planning for a circumferential highway, because that's.
Okay.
That's a really good point, and it's so funny because you don't think about it. I mean, I never thought we needed a bypass until we got the bypass, and everybody going, man, I'm really glad we have the bypass. and you might be right, Joe. I mean, and I've never given any thought, but it could be a very fundamental addition to the county. Joe, what?
The big holdup about, circling the town with a bypass is the river. There's been studies done and talks done about a bridge, somewhere on the river for years, but that's always the cost in acquiring the land and building the bridge. And so that's the big holdup right there on whether we do a bypass completely around Salisbury or not, so.
Yeah, and I guess that may be the purpose of this. I mean, it's called a feasibility study, and you're looking into the fact of whether it's worth the squeeze, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will touch on, if you don't mind, West Side Collector. While we haven't had the last phase completed, the investigatory items would be things like stormwater, because at the time that it was designed, the new stormwater regulations were not in. There could be new culverts, new property lines. I don't know how long that geotechnical information was completed. So this, again, it's just the feasibility, the ability to do these improvements, and to be able to fund the feasibility studies and studies that it would take to look into it.
I do know that where it had initially been planned, West Side Collector, the state actually did road work on Nanticoke Road, and they expanded that portion of that intersection to allow for it in anticipation of it, and we never came back to them.
Yeah.
So I get it. Now, what is the council's take? And I mean, this seems somewhat arbitrary, but do you think with what Councilman Hastings suggested, that we should ask that the feasibility study also include the extension of the final quarter of the bypass, as opposed to just simply the areas of the bypass where there's access to the northbound and westbound highways? Yes, Josh.
And I say, I don't know where, as far as planning goes, how that's all, what the next steps would be exactly, and I don't have it all in my mind or understanding of how that's working out, but I definitely would like to see that go forward. Every business person will tell you, the quicker you can get your product onto a area that the lower the cost, that is very important. So the infrastructure automatically breeds jobs, I think, is what I learned in my business degree. So the more that we can move in that direction, I think it'd be really helpful.
I don't think there would be any objections to adding that. If you don't mind, I think we maybe want to keep it a separate topic or a
So
separate
it would be a
item.
separate item as opposed to the
The
ramps,
collector.
as opposed to the ramps that are already on here in reference to the. So right now you have the Salisbury bypass, and it's simply,
Just the ramps?
yeah, it's just yeah. Well, you have section 1, which is the bypass, which is referencing the eastbound and westbound access. And you have number 2, which is State Route 12, which is almost the same thing.
Right.
It's however they put them together, it was rather shoddy. I mean, they dump you out here, and it's pretty risky trying to get in and out of those, whether you're on Snow Hill Road or whether you're over on Route 50. So they are listed as 2 separate items. So I guess this would be a third item.
I would personally,
Okay.
just because if they,
Right.
I don't know how they prioritize. We don't really prioritize per se. I can leave that up to you guys, this is your consensus, so if you want it wrapped into one, that's great. If you want it to be separate, we can.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny how they've separated those 2 issues, because one of them it was suggested as a traffic light, and the first one was just simply trying to figure out some way, I guess, to make the traffic flow a little easier, and that might be a rerouting issue. Whereas on State Route 12, it was determined somehow that a traffic signal might be warranted there.
Right.
I don't know how there couldn't be some type of planning also involved in redirecting it as well. I don't know. But right now, we're going to go with traffic safety. So I guess a third number on the list would be the bypass as a whole. It certainly would have to be a separate entity. And
Yeah,
again,
it's kind of funny, we're talking about an inner loop. We can't even fix a road in Mordella and put 2 tiles under it.
Well, at least just starting that process to be able to secure.
I understand.
I mean,
Yeah, I was just being
be-
facetious.
I was just being clear on that for the folks in the land, because obviously as time goes by, it's going to be more and more expensive for something that is most likely going to happen.
Sure.
Period.
else? So is the council okay with adding that? All right, and that would be great. Okay. Wonderful, thank you.
I just want to add one thing. I agree, but make sure it doesn't go through neighborhoods. Make sure that the bypass, if you're extending anything when it comes to bypasses and all this stuff, make sure it doesn't go through neighborhoods.
Well, this would just be the feasibility portion.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I can't even.
When you do the study, it's happened so many times that neighborhoods have been destroyed or people had to move from their homes. And I'm just saying, consider that in your study.
Just briefly skipping the Port of Salisbury, the West Side Collector, everybody's okay with that. And then we have the drainage improvement on Maryland 349. All right, so we will now go back to Port of Salisbury, the study.
Yeah, I just think the port, and I understand, and I know the council appreciates the importance of the port and the economic impact it has, and the dredging that is required. And the Army Corps wants to see about 1 million tons a year coming up that river, and we're right about 1 million tons a year. But commodities change, economic cycles change, and I just it's not a big ask here from the state, but I think we want to show them the importance of the Wicomico to our economy locally, and maybe even strengthen the relationship with the Port of Baltimore, and really look at the commodities. It's been in a structural decline, if you will, in the types of commodities that are coming up the river, especially petroleum and gasoline, as cars are more efficient today than they were 20 years ago, more electric cars than 20 years ago, more natural gas and heating oil for in place of heating oil than there was 20 years ago. So we know those commodities are going to change over time. And it's just kind of keep an eye on it and research, and always be on the lookout for additional commodities that we can ship and maintain the river as a recreational river as well as a commerce.
Is there a grant provided for mitigation of hazardous materials in the Port of Salisbury recently? Do you know?
Not that I'm aware of,
Okay.
but I may not be aware of that.
All right,
I wouldn't necessarily be made aware.
It is. I think when they were talking about, doing Lick Street, when demolishing,
Right.
and, where they had the oil tanks.
Yes.
And I think they did receive funding for that project. And I know years ago, they had something called brownfield
Yeah, Brownfield.
funding
Right.
for local governments, and we had to lose that, but
Something else may have been done within the last 6 months. I hate
Yeah.
to start spreading rumors in public. But I'll stop right there.
yeah,
We're okay with the Port of Salisbury?
yes.
Okay, great. Anything else, Mr. Ryan?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Moving down, we have pedestrian improvements. I guess the question is, unless anyone wants to elaborate on that, is there any questions that council member has in reference to the municipal requests, City of Salisbury, Town of Delmar, Hebron, and Pittsfield, and Willards? And then we have public school with the Salisbury University and Warwick Community College. Any questions or concerns from anyone? So as it is in its whole, are we okay with this? And adding as what Mr. Hastings suggested in reference to the bypass, we're okay with this? Everybody's good? Okay, then, how it is, then we can move forward with it. That'd be fine. That'd be great.
July
Charlie?
5th.
July 5th. Wonderful. Any other questions or comments from either of you? Okay. All right. Well, look, thank you very much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. This time, I entertain a motion to adjourn to go into closed work session.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.